Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Pastor Steve, for your wonderful message. It is a season of transition. It is a season of change, and just this season in general right now is one that I personally enjoy. As I mentioned earlier when I was giving the announcements, I love this season of November. I love the fall. I love the holiday season. I love that there's excitement. I love that there's celebration. I love that we get to see old friends when we celebrate here. People invite their friends, their family. We see all these old faces, and there's so much love. And there's so much excitement. There's so much happiness that comes here. And we focus on the importance of being thankful during this time, just naturally most churches do. We then transition to the season of Advent, and we celebrate the birth of our Savior, and then we go into the New Year's, and it's a wonderful time. And it's not hard to talk about how great it is to celebrate. It's not hard to talk about things when they're going good. And it's very rare that people often seek guidance or they need counseling when things are good, when they see like, oh, my bank account is overflowing right now, my marriage is going well, my kids are healthy, my job is paying me more than they should. I really need counseling right now, Pastor. Things are just going really well for me, and I really need to know, what do I do with all this goodness that's overwhelming right now? That oftentimes doesn't happen. And the flip side to this holiday season, the unfortunate thing is that, to say the least, the holiday season can be turbulent. When going through some studies, when I was creating this sermon and looking online, over the years the holiday season just rounded out to saying turbulent, because there's once upon a time where the holiday season would produce a lot of depression, and the suicide rates would increase because of the various expectations for like, oh, everyone's going to be with their families right now, everyone's going to be with their friends right now, everyone's supposed to be happy right now, and this expectation burdens some people, because not everyone, unfortunately, has a perfect family. Actually, let me change that. No one has a perfect family. It would be more accurate to say not everyone has a decent family. A lot of people have very broken families that can't even come together and agree, hey, let's have a meal without so much shouting at each other. It's unfortunate, but a lot of people can't say that. A lot of people don't have their brothers and sisters in their life. They're all estranged. They all went off right after they became adults, and you've never seen them since. And that's hard. And that's reality. And because of that, the studies have changed over the holiday season, where there was a rise in depression and suicide around the holiday season because of that. And yet after there was this rise, there became an awareness of depression and suicide, and so there was more support given, and there's more awareness to those people, and so there's more advertising for like, hey, if you're lonely during this holiday season, come here, come over to this place. Everyone's welcome. It's like just regular awareness, not even like, hey, get some counseling kind of awareness. But that too is there. And so because of that, it's kind of petered out, and the depression, suicide has gone back to a normal level. And it's turbulent. It's gone up, it's gone down. People are still sad, yes, but they have more outlets, they have more resources to be able to handle that kind of sadness, to be able to handle that kind of depression during this season. And for all of us here today that are going into this holiday season, that are going into Thanksgiving, going into Christmas, going into just all of these things, that know someone that has a turbulent life, we might not be the person that suffers from depression or suffers from a non-decent family, but we might know someone who is always struggling around the time. Or we ourselves might be the person that is going through hardship, because we know that tragedy, like the shooting that happened, and we know that death does not wait for anyone. It's not something where it's like, hey, this is coming in 6 months, prepare yourself. No, it just happens in the the snap of a finger, and we have to deal with it. And so I'm going to look at two passages today. The first one is out of Philippians, 4, verse 11 through 13. And in this is Philippians is written by Paul to the church in Philippi, and this is near the end of his prison sentence. And when Paul had been to prison, over the course of his life, he's gone to prison several times. And oftentimes when he's in prison, he's there for about 2-ish years, give or take. And this time when he was in prison, he wrote a few epistles, which are called the prison epistles. And those were Ephesians, Colossians, and Philemon. This was being the last of his prison epistles that he wrote, Philippians. And in this time, in Bible times, it's always good to be aware of the context of things. Like when I talked about Zacchaeus a few weeks ago, and the context of who he was and why he was so horrible of an individual. This time, when we think of Paul being in prison, prison is not what we think of today. In comparison, prison today compared to prison then is like going to a hotel. It's like being taken care of, because prison today, you get 3 meals a day, you get all the medical treatment you need, you get your own clothing, you can even earn a degree in prison. There are people that have gotten their doctorates in prison. That is crazy. That is, in comparison, I'm not saying prison is, oh yeah, everyone go to prison, it's so great there. No. Prison compared to Bible time prison was a holiday, or is a holiday. Because prison then, you were thrown into this dank, dirty cell carved out of stone in the middle of like a mountain. And that's it. They just left you there. Oftentimes, unless you're under house arrest, which Paul was in a different time, he was under arrest or he was in prison, you had to survive. They didn't feed you there. They didn't clothe you there. You didn't have your own little toilet there that had its own plumbing there. A lot of times, prisoners would have their friends and family come and give them food daily. And if you didn't, I guess you're going to die in prison. And so prison there, you were just thrown into a hole. Good luck. You committed the crime, now you're going to do the time. Even if that time is like a month and you're dead. Whatever. Prison there was not nice. Prison there was harsh. And even though corruption exists in the prison system today, it was even worse then. You get flogged, which just means you get beat. You would get hit around. Whatever, it does not matter. There were not a lot of laws to protect prisoners like there is today. And so Paul was in the midst of prison, and he writes this in Philippians. He says, "I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstance." And whenever we read in Scripture, there are some broad and some abstract concepts that get thrown out regularly. And these oftentimes people won't go into deep research or deep exegesis of these things that we come across in Scripture, and it can be kind of hard. And we just say like, oh yeah, I found contentment. That's it, I'm just content. And we just say that. But we don't get practical, like, well, what does that look like every single day, Paul? You're in prison right now. You have time to write and explain what contentment means. But he doesn't. And a lot of times in Scripture, there are things that just say like, oh, like in Proverbs, when Saul was writing, it said, or King Solomon, he said like, here's one important thing, my son, about wisdom. Get wisdom. That's what it says, just something just straight up like that. It's like, what does get wisdom mean, Dad? Can you explain it to me like practically? And so there are some concepts that are abstract. Wisdom, the concept of wisdom is abstract. It's not something where it's all like, oh, well, let's go through, you can go to Walmart, it's about $8.95 to get some wisdom. No, it's something that we are always learning. And so the concept of being content in all situations is also inherently something that's more abstract. And so that's something that I wanted to look at today, that concept of being content, because Paul, a man who had persecuted Christians and then in turn became a Christian that was persecuted himself, is someone who understood hardship. He's someone who understood what it meant to be treated unfairly. He's a man who understood what it meant to be beaten, what it meant to be lied against, what it meant to be schemed against, what it meant to be plotted against. He understood these things, and yet he, in the midst of this, was able to write to the church of Philippi, I found the secret to being content in the midst of whatever is going on in my life at any time. It's something big that I'm sure anyone who read that would want to know. And so the two most important parts of this entire passage are contentment and where it comes from. Contentment, where it comes from. Those are the two biggest things of this. And one thing that I want to look at to understand this verse is another verse, and that's in James. And so James 1, verse 2 through 4, I'm going to be looking at. And it's the name of my sermon, and it says, "Count it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, and let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." And so one thing that James says in this is he counts it pure joy when he goes into the midst of hardship. And when we read something like that, it's like, that doesn't make sense either, James. What does it mean to have joy? You count everything joy. It's like, oh, my sister just died. That's joy? James, what does that mean? And so one thing to distinguish in this, because this also goes hand in hand with what Paul was saying, being content, is defining these terms. Now there's a difference that we need to establish very clearly, is that joy is not happiness, and happiness is not joy. And that's something that should never be confused. Because if they do, you're going to be miserable when you're trying to understand this. And I'm 100% sure over the course of time, people have interpreted this scripture incorrectly, where they thought like, oh, I count it all joy in the midst of anything. I find myself content no matter what the circumstance. So that means I have to be happy. I have to put on this strong face and act happy even though I'm mourning in the midst, even though my entire business I was building collapsed and my family's falling apart. I count it all joy. I say with a smile, no, that's not it. Happiness and joy are far from the same. Happiness, let me define for you, is something that is external. Happiness is based on situations. It's based on events. It's based on people, places, things, and our thoughts. Happiness is future-oriented in that we put all of our eggs in someone else's basket, whether it be a person, a place, a thing, a thought, whatever. We place all of our eggs of what will make us happy somewhere else. And it depends on outside situations to align with our expectations, ultimately, to result in our happiness. That's what happiness is. It's something that is dependent on external circumstances. It comes from the outside. And as we know, happiness can fluctuate violently through our life. We can be happy, we sit down, oh no, the thing I ate last night did not sit with me, I'm not happy anymore. That quick, our happiness can drain. And that's intentional. Happiness is not meant to be something that is long-bearing. It's not something that's supposed to be, that's something that sustains you. It's just a feeling. Joy is something much deeper than all of that. Joy is something that, through my research, I was looking up the difference between happiness and joy. And one interesting thing that I came across almost consistently when researching the difference is that even in secular psychologist articles and writings, all of them would point not happiness to external things, but they would point to joy being something related to something spiritual in nature, which is so interesting that even if they were a complete secular psychologist, they still admitted and conceded to the nature of joy being something inherently spiritual, some connection to something deeper than ourselves. And thankfully, we as Christians know that it's not just some force out in the universe out there that we're connecting to. No. Joy is connecting to the one who saves. Joy is being in relationship with our God. Joy is something that sustains us in the midst of hardship. Joy is something that doesn't flee in the midst of our fluctuating world. Joy is something that is there in the midst of heartache. Joy is something there that is in the midst of the world falling apart around us. And so, all of us here, every single one of us, has been through hardships. I think I can say that safely. All of us here have been through things that have broken our hearts. And yet, we're here today. The things that the enemy has put up against us did not stop us, for however old you are, through all these years, to getting to this point right here and right now. The joy that we have because of God has helped us push through those things that were meant to defeat us, that were meant to crush us, that were meant to cripple us and cause us to lose our faith. And so when someone like James writes in James 1, verse 2 through 4, when he writes to the city in Jerusalem, he says, count it pure joy. He doesn't say count it pure happiness, count it pure ecstasy. When something hard comes your way, he doesn't say count it, just be happy. When, my brothers and sisters, be happy when you face trials of any kind. Be happy because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. He doesn't say that. He says, count it all joy. Count it all to Christ, the one who strengthens us, because that, as we go back to Philippians, is the secret to contentment. That is the secret for all of this, how Paul is able to go through things. Because for all of us, I would never tell anyone ever that if they're mourning, I'm like, oh, just be happy. You know, they're with God now, so be happy. It's like, you don't have to be sad. No, of course not. If someone's finances are just in the toilet, I'm like, oh, be happy because you're free from the burden of money and all this. No, of course not. And that's not what James nor Paul is saying either in the midst of this. He's not saying I have found happiness in the midst of all hardships. He's not saying count it all, like I said, ecstasy. He's saying count it joy. I found contentment. And you can be miserable. You can be heartbroken. You can be of low spirits and still have joy. You can still have contentment even though everything in your world that mattered has fallen away. You can have joy in the midst of hardship. And going back to Philippians, where he says in verse 12, he says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And Paul is a man who has been through all of that. He's a man who has been in plenty. He's been a Pharisee, the height of the society, and he's been a prisoner, the very lowest of low. He's been everywhere in this spectrum. And he knows how to be content, how to have joy in any moment. And he says at the very end, verse 13, I can do all this through him who gives me strength. And that's the secret right there. And so, for anyone who might have thought of this incorrectly in the past, let me correct that for you, that you can be sad. It is okay to grieve. It is okay to go through hardships. It is okay to have doubt in times, because we're human. But we have joy that will push us through that, because all of us here have been through things. All of us here have had things that have shattered our world at a time. And yet still in 2018, in November, all of you found your way through all the hardships, all the ugliness, all the things that should crush you and defeat you in your world, you have found yourself here today. You are not crushed. You are not defeated. There is the joy of the Lord that gives you strength. And so, when we go into this holiday season, when we go into a turbulent time, when we see tragedies like the one in Thousand Oaks, when we see natural disasters like the fire that has claimed 9 lives already and caused hundreds of thousands of people to evacuate, we can mourn along with people. We can hurt along with our brothers and sisters. As we see in Scripture, Christ cried over the death of his brother Lazarus. He cried, he wept. Why? Because it hurts to lose someone. Even though Christ, being God, knew, oh, you're going to be fine. I'm about to resurrect you. Lazarus, don't even worry. You're going to be fine. He knew that. And yet he still chose, and it was still written in the canonical Bible, that Jesus wept. And so it is okay to weep. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to encounter hardship and feel overwhelmed in the midst of it. But we know the secret to contentment. We know to count it all joy because we have Christ who strengthens us. Amen? Amen. Let's pray. Father, Son, Spirit, we just come before you this afternoon. God, we count it all joy that we have you. God, we know that no matter what the enemy throws against us, no matter what hardship, no matter what tragedy, no matter what attack against us, God, we know that you will win in the very end of this, God. And because of that, we have joy. We have contentment. Even when we are face down on the ground, covered in tears, God, we know we have contentment because we know we have you, and that all joy, all contentment, all hope is lost if you weren't there, God. And so we place all of our joy. We find all of our joy in you, and we count it all joy. We thank you, God. We just praise in Jesus' name.